is the value is the property interest should sell for in a competitive market after a reasonable exposure time as of a specified date in cash or in terms equivalent to cash under conditions requisite to a fair sale, with the buyer and seller each acting prudently, knowledgeably, and for their own self-interest, assuming neither is under distress. So it's typically motivated buyer and seller in an open market when it's been exposed. Commonly, 3 approaches to value. Sales comparison approach, which probably everybody in this room understands. That's what other properties that are similar sell for in the open market. So typically in a house, that's what they do. They go out and find what other houses sell for, and then make adjustments to them to differentiate from your house. There are cost approach. That's another one that some homeowners probably have seen. It's how much is it going to cost me to buy the land and build the structure that's there. And then you take off depreciation if it's an older home. The one that most homeowners probably never interact with is an income approach, something I deal with almost every day. And that is, a property's worth ever how much money I can make from it. So renting it like an apartment complex or an office building, how much can I rent it for? And how much of that do I have to spend in expenses? And then based on a capitalization method, it's what it's worth to me. Lots of reasons to have appraisals done. Most commonly is for a purchase and mortgage. In that instance, appraisers are, used to be I'd say typically, but now are always employed by the bank. And an appraiser has a fiduciary responsibility to the public in general. Under our licensure law and the ethics that we abide by, when a bank hires us, even though the bank is paying us and you're paying us in a roundabout way, our responsibility as the public in general to make sure that a mortgage is not based on a fraudulent or wrong number. For us, when I do an appraisal, it doesn't matter if I'm working for a buyer or a seller, or if it's in a tax appeal instance, whether I'm working for the government or the property owner. The number's the number, it's going to be the same no matter who's paying them. Because it is. It's my opinion of what a property's worth. Those are the generalities. Of the handouts I provided, 2 are from the Appraisal Institute, which is the organization in which I'm designated through. It's the largest organization for appraisers in the United States and in the world. One is on estimating home value, reasons why you do it, and the other one's on understanding appraisals. Kind of goes through the methodology of the 3 approaches, how we gather information, what different situations that we look at. And then they estimating home value, tells you the different reasons, discusses why an appraisal would be needed. The last item that I provided was, it's actually produced by Representative Kevin Cotter's office. To be honest, it's probably I'm sure that they developed it somewhere in Lansing and it's just Representative Cotter published it. But it does give you the step-by-step method of appealing your property taxes. And what you have to go through to do that and how it's done. One of the misconceptions that's out there is the assessor that puts the value on your house, they're not actually doing appraisal, they're doing an assessment. They use a different methodology than what appraisers use in a different system. The funny thing is assessors are set up to do it that way, but then under state law it says you should be assessed on what your property is worth, but then the methodology they use doesn't necessarily get to anywhere near the same number as what an appraiser did. So, with that general overview, questions?
Does that mean that there would be like a discrepancy then?
Yep, it very well could be. One way or the other. Either they could have it high or low. But if you appeal your taxes, there's a local board, a board of review, that you would go to, and that'd be 3 of your fellow citizens and whatever your taxing entity is. So in a township, it'd be 3 other township residents that you would go and to say, I think my house is worth less than what the assessor does. Because obviously you wouldn't go in and say it's worth more, because nobody wants to pay taxes. But you would go in and argue in front of them, and then if they say no, then actually in Michigan there's a whole set of courts called the tax tribunal that's set up just for property taxes. And then you'd go to them and have an appraisal done on your behalf, and then to get your taxes lowered. Yep. Any other questions? I know it's an exciting subject. It is for me, but, yes?
When they get comparables to appraise your home, where do they get that information from? Is it?
Typically, it's gathered through the MLS, multiple listing service, so from real estate brokers and salespersons. We can also gather information from equalization departments on sales that may have happened outside of the MLS system. But generally, especially for houses, it's probably 90 to 95% of the comparables that anybody ever uses are out of the MLS. And the theory there too is that in the MLS that gives you that aspect that they were exposed to the market, because when they put them on the MLS, all the brokers in the community see them, so that in theory they've been sold on a competitive market. Where a private sale, if I sell it to you, we may have negotiated a price and nobody else had a chance to bid on it, and I may have either undersold it to you or oversold it to you, and it wouldn't be at a market level.
Is that a website that you can go to?
The MLS?
Yeah.
The MLS it's a private listing service for the local realtors, but now with the way technology's been over the last 10 years, like almost all of them, they put it on realtor.com,
Okay.
or I don't think it works well in our area, but is it Trulia that you see the websites for? There's a lot of them out there that when realtors put them on, they put them on realtor.com and other public listing services. Now the problem, or the thing I don't know is on realtor.com, if you can go in and find out what other properties have sold for. On realtor.com, you can go find out what other properties are listed for
Right.
and what's for sale in your area. But I'm not sure you can go in and say, tell me which ones have sold.
I'm just asking because on Monday I called my bank because I wanted to refinance
Yep.
at a lower interest rate. And they wanted to know what my house was worth, and I was like, you know, well, I bought it for this, but I'm pretty sure it's not worth that anymore. And they did some web search somewhere, and it came up like half of what I owed.
Okay, they may have used a lot of your larger banks, and in refinances, under federal law, a bank is only ever required, if they're loaning them their own money out of their own bank and not selling it anywhere else, selling the mortgage, they're only required to get an appraisal if it's more than $250,000. Legally required to. Now, what happens is, most of your banks anymore, even though you may borrow the money from First Bank or the credit union or Mercantile Bank, isn't First Bank anymore? They're not actually loaning you the money. What they do is they give you the money and then they turn around and sell that to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, we've all heard of that over the last 5-6 years. And they give the money they reimburse the bank for it. Well, since it's going through that process, they have to have an appraisal done. But they have automated valuation methodologies now. And what's happened, especially in the housing industry in big cities where they have lots of sales or big communities, it's a big it's statistical analysis that they say, okay, they put in your neighborhood and they may enter how many bedrooms you have or roughly your square footage. And then it's just a statistical analysis saying, okay, we have 100 sales, and if we all remember from math class, and that bell curve, everything falls within reasonable range. And what they do is then they take the top of that bell curve and say, okay, based on stats, 80% of the values are going to fall between, 80,000 and 120,000. And then, so if your house fell in that bell range, then they're going, okay, we can reasonably make that loan, and we don't have to pay for an appraisal. So they may have got that. But what happens what I've noticed in our community here, because we're rural, is there's not enough sales to accurately base it on using statistics. Just because we don't have that many homes that sell. But I'm assuming that's what they probably did, because I know the last time Deb and I went in that's the banker sat right there and he ran it and said, yep, it comes in at, our little analysis says it's worth this number. And you gotta go,
Yeah.
okay.
And I wanted some kind of ballpark because the credit union, well, that was the bank that I was with, but the
Yep.
credit union offers an even better interest rate. But it would have been $450 for an appraisal, and I was like, I don't know if it's gonna make it or not.
If you're gonna bet it. Most real estate, if you called a real estate agent, they might be able to, they can help you out, whether or not they choose to. But they would have access to that you could go into them and say, hey, can you what's sold in my neighborhood in the last, 6 months. Or school districts are typically important, so, if you live in Shepherd School District, Mount Pleasant School District, hey, what's sold in Mount Pleasant School District, on the west side of Mount Pleasant, I have a 3-bedroom home that's 1,200 square feet, and they could give you, from 1,000 to 14, they could do that and say, you have these 5 homes that sold, and that's at least gonna give you a general ballpark. Yes, ma'am?
I just want to say, in California, we have a website. I don't, it's nationwide, but we can go on and see our own neighborhood. And it'll tell what that whole house sold for.
Here-
5 people back.
Yeah, here in Isabella County, they have on the Isabella County website, they have a GIS system, Geographical Information System. And on there, you can go in and look at properties, and they do have prior sales of properties, but they don't necessarily go back very far. And then the other aspect in Michigan is, we're a non-disclosure state, which means when you buy your house, or your apartment complex, or your office building, if you pay $10 and file an affidavit, you swear on the affidavit that you paid $1 million for your office building, and only the assessor and the equalization department get to see that, and then you record a $1 deed. As an appraiser, I don't like that rule. I'd rather everybody say what they paid for it, because then it would make my life easier on finding what stuff sold for. But in Michigan, you have that. So if you have a bunch of houses in your neighborhood and everybody put down $1, it's not public information at that point. Now, the funny thing is, most people that spend that $10 and file an affidavit and say they paid $1, they bought their house through the MLS, and the brokers still put it on the MLS, so all the brokers and all the real estate appraisers know what you paid for your house, but the general public doesn't know. Yes, ma'am.
Zillow.
Zillow, there's one of
It's a
them
good one
that,
that
yep.
you can go to, and it'll list all the houses in your general area and what they sold for recently.
So it does do sales on
Yeah, it
Zillow.
does do sales.
I wasn't sure.
Zillow.com, Zillow.
I think that's
They do television commercials. I've seen, yeah, I knew that they listed stuff that was for sale, I didn't know if they did sales.
Well, they'll list the house for sale, and then they'll show the whole community what houses sold for recently around that house.
So that's an idea that Zillow may work if people are doing them. Because I know some of those websites, brokers, salespeople and brokers put their information on there, as well as people that are for sale by owner.
The bank that I'm with actually pulled that out.
And that may be how they did it too, see?
Yeah.
But the problem with some of those websites is it's much like eBay. It doesn't really matter what anybody's asking to sell their stuff for, really is what did they end up selling it for, and that's why you need the sales information, not just what people are listing them for. Because I've been in this business for 20 years, most people that own property, whether it's a house or an office building or an apartment complex or whatever, they think it's worth a lot more than what it really is, what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Man, is the old SEV times 2 plus 10%? Is that, wait, I mean, I know I'm old. And it's a
Well,
long time since I've been in the mortgage
Under
business.
Michigan law,
But that's what we used to do. I mean, just to get a ballpark.
well, under Michigan law, you're supposed to be taxed at 50% of the market value of your property.
Okay.
Are there any assessors in here?
Market value?
Yes, market value. I'm not a fan of assessors, because they're SEV,
Nobody is.
and the problem is, that they're handcuffed, to be honest. If they do what they're supposed to do, and they do it by the book, if they find market value, it's luck. Because a lot of the assessments done on cost basis and manuals, and it's not really going out doing what an appraiser does and finding other sales in the house or in the neighborhood and saying, okay, these 5 houses around here all sold for $100,000. This house is worth $100,000. They've got another system that if they get to the same number, it's kind of luck.
And that's true, because we were not allowed to use it.
You're not allowed to use the MLS and stuff. So
We
they're,
did sometimes.
even though the state law says that, in theory, the way the state law describes what an assessor's supposed to do, they should be doing that, but then they're given a set of rules that they can't do that. So, in theory, yes, you should, well, in theory, you should be able to take your SEV, not your taxable value, your SEV,
Right.
and times it by 2, and that's what your property should be worth.
Right.
In reality, no. I mean, I'm doing one property right now that it is 50%, I say it's worth 50% more than what it's really worth. And I've done them the other way,
Right.
where I may say the property's worth $1 million and they're being taxed like it's worth $500,000. So it's kind of a hit or miss on it.
What if you're surrounded by, you have this beautiful house, and you're surrounded by houses that are kind of decrepit and they don't look like they have.
From an investment point of view, you never want to be the nicest house in the neighborhood.
Oh,
And when you go in the neighborhood and buy, you never want to buy the nicest house. You want to buy the worst house
fix it up.
and fix it up. If you want to make money on doing that. Yeah, if you're the nicest house and you've got not so nice houses all the way around you, yeah, you're not gonna,
Your house comes down there, huh?
because it's location. Three most important aspects in real estate are location, location, location. I mean, a house that you have that's out in the country, if you put that exact same house on the river or in a much better neighborhood, then it's gonna be worth more. So, yeah, if you're impacted by the neighborhood in which you build and what the other homes in the neighborhood are. And that's why you see it, especially in larger cities, when they start to decline and people quit taking care of their houses, why it spirals right out. Because the one guy in the neighborhood that may be taking care of his house, and you got the neighbors on either side of him his is not gonna be worth as much, and then he doesn't take care of it himself then, and it spirals out of control. Any other questions? Yes.
So if you did get an assessment, but your tax, SCD is low right now, do they have to report that and then they come back and raise your taxes?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. And the way the assessments work is, in theory, it's the value of your property. So like for this year, for 2014, you're paying taxes on your property on what your property was worth December 31st, 2013. In theory, they're supposed to determine the value of your property on that day, and that's what you pay the taxes for the next year. So if you didn't build your house until you got a vacant piece of property, you built your house in January, that first year, you're paying taxes like your property was just vacant dirt. Then they're gonna get you the next year. There are certain rules on how they can make changes to stuff. Proposal A has made a large impact in how assessments and how people appeal their taxes and whether or not they appeal them. Because under Proposal A is, if you've owned a piece of property, then every year it only goes up by the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. So if you've owned it, if you continue to own it, there shouldn't be any large jumps. There may be large jumps in your SEV of what they say your property's worth, but your taxable value only goes up a little bit each year. And they passed that, well, in 1993 we passed it, it became law in 94, was to help people so that if you got in a neighborhood where the values were going through the roof, you wouldn't get taxed out of your home. And then when you sell, the next guy though, you may be paying taxes like your house is worth $50,000. You sell it at 100, the person that buys your house's taxes are gonna go way up.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, as appraisers, we've tried to get into the salespeople and brokers' heads. When they do a listing, they always tell you, this lady's paying $500 a year in property taxes. Well, I don't care what she's paying, but based on the SEV, if I bought it, what's it gonna go to? Because that's what's important. She may be paying $500, but if I buy it, my taxes are gonna be $1,000. Now, as a new homeowner, or a potential buyer, you were looking at it going, I'm only gonna pay $500 a year in property taxes. You buy the house and then your first bill is $1,000. And so a lot of the brokers have gotten into that where they start doing that and informing their clients that don't look at what they've been paying in property taxes. This is what we think you're gonna end up paying.
And yeah, that happened to us as one homeowner, so for township, we used to, it's like huge each time. And I don't know, in the bank where we had our mortgage through, because I had to go to appeal it, and actually, we sure hobbled into that, so we haven't done that yet. But I thought she had told us they could only do that 3 times. Is that true, that they could only keep jumping it? Not even just a little bit, they're like really
Well,
jumping it up.
on the SEV, they can do that every year. But your taxable value under Proposal A, that can only go up by the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever's less, except if you make additions to the house. So, I mean, if you had a house and you added on 1,200 square feet, your original, let's say your house was 1,200 square feet and double the size of it. The 1,200 square foot house, that can only grow by the rate of inflation or 5%. Then they can add the added value of that 1,200 that you added. So your house could go, I mean, your taxables could jump way up, but it's because you made an addition.
Yeah, we
It was
have
under your
anything
control.
to the house,
But they can change your SCV every year, but your taxable value can only step up by the rate of inflation, which like this last year, I think the factor for 2014 was 1.6%. Or 5%, they capped it at 5 so that if inflation went nutty, you weren't getting taxed on your house again. But the process is,
to us.
yeah, the process in your, when that handout from Representative Cotter will tell you the process, but it's typically, at the end of February, you get a notice, this is what your house, this is what it was last year, this is what we say it's worth this year, these are the increases. Within, I think it's within 14 days, or they have to send you that notice 10 days prior than what they do a border review. That's your local township, 3 people from your local township sit on it. You go in and you essentially file an appeal and you say, look, this is wrong. You can't just walk in and go, this is wrong. Because the guys are gonna go, they've been trained, your border review's been trained, the assessor's right. Back up your assessor. So you need to go in and go to a broker, get sales of what other stuff is sold for. There are brokers in town, there are people that will act as your representative and go on your behalf. Some of them charge a flat fee, they may do it for $100.
Yeah, because right now, with the taxable, they've got it at more than what it's actually been appraised at, and the appraisal was fairly new, because we just bought the house maybe not even, I think it was like 2 years ago, so right now they've got it taxed at so much that it's more,
Okay.
they're saying it's worth more.
You
than
have-
so.
14 days that you can go to the, you can file with the tax tribunal. Border review, you can file with the tax tribunal by July 31st if you have a residential property. And then it will go through Lansing and it'll actually go through a court system. Chances are it's a small claims because you're not arguing over a bunch of money. And actually, the small claims is kind of cool. You file with them, it's essentially filing a lawsuit, but it's like, don't quote me on it. Commercial property is $250. I think a homeowner may be $25 or $50 to file the complaint. They'll actually send either a sitting tribunal judge or an attorney that acts like an administrative judge. They have them right here. When you're in Isabella County, it's typically at Mount Pleasant City Hall. And you go down, the assessor will be there, and you argue to the judge, and the judge will make a determination on what it's worth. But you can, several of the brokers here in town I know do it as a consultation business. And if you want to, I can give you names afterwards on people that will do that for you. And they charge a set fee, and they go in, and whether they win or lose, you're gonna pay them. Typically, when you get into the big commercial stuff like I do, there are actually consultants out there that it's kind of a good deal if you can get into it. They do it on a percentage of the savings. I mean, if I'm doing $1 million apartment complex, I'll act as your representative and I get first year's tax savings. Because once your taxable value is down under Proposal 8, it only grows at inflation or 5%. So if you save them $5,000 the first year, they're going to say, in theory, they're going to save $5,000 every year after that. And they do it that way. But on homes, it's typically, yeah, for this amount of money, I'll put together 3 or 4 sales. But your border review, even if you go in as yourself, you need to have something that backs up your number. Like if you had
Yeah,
it,
I think that's why we made it go, because we didn't know. really
if you had it appraised for the bank, now they're going to argue that's for banking, it's different. But
Yes, to the bank.
the number, you can argue the number's the number. I mean, it shouldn't matter, if you're doing market value, it shouldn't matter who the appraisal was done for, it should all be the same number. Now the problem is, there's a lot of different definitions of market value. In commercial business, there's a lot of different value. There's market value as if, it's called fee simple, but there's market value if I leased my building to you, that has a specific value to me, because the lease may not be at what somebody else would pay. It may be a high number, it may be a low number. So there's different values, but in a house, it doesn't really matter who does the appraisal, it should be market value. And the Board of Review should understand that. The problem is if you had your appraisal done 3 years ago, and you're going in there now and they're going, yeah, but that's what they said it was worth $100,000 3 years ago. Market's either gotten worse or gotten better, and this is what we say it's worth. But house appraisers, you said that they quoted you $450 at the credit union. Yeah, you're $350 to $500 for what typical house appraisers charge.
I used to be a realtor, so I did my own assessment, and then I went and I had another company broker do it. And the Isabella County Board would not accept that, they just laughed at me. And they said, why do you think, and I said, I sold real estate for many years, I know that you're raping me financially, I know what you're doing. And so, they were charging me $7,000 a year for my taxes from when I bought my house, and it's an old rundown house. So it was falling down when I bought it, and they wanted $7,000 a year. So I said, fine, and I hired an assessor, and I brought in that with a licensed assessor, and then they backed up the truck, and I said, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Cut my taxes dramatically.
Yeah, most of them it is. It does. Well, they're, I don't know, assessors and those guys are kind of like insurance companies. If you ask the first time, they tell you no because they expect you to go away. But if you go back and make it an issue, then most of them, probably in the tax appeals that I've been associated with over 20 years, I'm going to tell you less than 10% and probably less than 5% actually go in front of a judge. Because the two, when you get to on some of the big stuff like apartment complexes, the property owner's hired an appraiser, the assessor's hired an appraiser. One side, when they see the other one, figures out that they're wrong. And that instead of paying the attorneys and paying appraisers to go to court, they're better off to go in and say, okay, you think it's worth A, I think it's worth B. Can we settle on C? I'll lose a little bit, you'll gain a little bit, we'll be. And so, even on houses, that's what it is. If you got an appraisal that said your house is worth $100,000 and the assessor thinks it's worth $140,000, you get to a point where you may not want to spend a ton of money and it's just like, okay, I'll take it that it's worth $120,000. It's in the middle. I'm saving money because I'm not paying taxes like it's worth $140,000. It's not as good as what I'd wanted, but you're better off. And you can go back every year and appeal your taxes. Now, your local board of review may get sick of seeing you and just say no just because they're sick of seeing you, but there is a process to go to the state level and do it at the next level.
How do you, I get, sorry, how do you go to the state level?
I can give you the website. It's go to the Michigan Department of Treasury
Okay.
and just type in tax tribunal, and they've got a whole process there on what the application looks like to fill out and the fees for it and where to mail it to.
So if you know you're gonna sell your house within a year or two, would you be better off just letting it go so that they think, you know, yeah, this is the appraised value? I mean,
That's an argument, but you know, from a commercial business point of view, when I look at it, I'm buying your apartment complex. It's really worth $1 million. The assessor says it's worth $1.5 million. Chances are, when I buy it, even if I buy it for $1 million, he's going to tax me like it's worth $1.5 million. So when I'm doing the evaluation, I'm like, my expenses are going to be way up here, so I'm going to pay you less because I'm not going to make as much money as what I should
so you'd be
be.
better off getting it lowered.
So you should be getting it lowered.
Okay.
Homeowners, that's the conundrum. They say it's worth $150, but you're getting taxed like it's worth $80 because you've owned it for 20 years. It's really worth $100, right? Do you waste your time going in and trying to get it down to $100? Because it's not going to save you any money because you're paying taxes down here at your taxable value, but your assessment's off. Realtors are going to tell you, yeah, it's worthwhile doing that because then the next guy, when he buys it for $100, he's not looking at it like I'm going to be overtaxed, and he may pay you a little less because my taxes are going to be $500 more a year than what they should be. So I'm going to pay you. Now I'm not going to pay you $100. I'm going to pay you $95 because. So those do it. A lot of people go, if it's not going to save me money, I'm not going to bother with it. I'm not going to spend the time to go down to the board of review and maybe get it. I'm not going to spend the time on an attorney to get it because it's not going to save me dollars in my wallet.
Okay.
But most of them, I mean, if you can find reasonable people, you go, look, every house around me is selling for $100. Why isn't mine worth $100? And make the assessor explain to you why yours is worth more. Any other questions? I've got business cards up here, if you would like them. I mean, I can probably point you in the right direction or provide information if anybody's interested. Right? If there's no more questions? Yes, ma'am?
I did have one, but I forgot it.
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
Age.
Okay, Misty, how old are you?
Okay.
While we're at it, we might just all want to give a big shout out, happy birthday.
No.
Today's Matt's birthday. So. Happy birthday, Matt.
29 again.
29 and holding.
I've been doing this since I was 9 years old.
No wonder there's been a mess. I'm gonna do the drawing. I only have one little giveaway this week. I know, I haven't been shopping.
You can show the store.
I know.
What's going on here?
I took it all up to Standish last week. I forgot about this week. And we have number 642. Oh, Daisy. I think you already have one of these. It's that apple cookie jar. She can give it to me. Oh, okay. I thought there was some. Okay. The other thing is, I don't know if you picked up this handout, but Underwood is doing a, Empower, You Empower, I don't know, anyway, something. They brought over the flyers. So if you didn't get it, you might want to sign up. I actually signed up for it. I don't know that it's open to employees, but they did say that I could go because I do the financial, the financial stuff. So, take a look at it, and you have to call the number at the bottom to register. There's 2 sessions, one is a lunch one and one is a dinner one. They're gonna provide a meal, so, read it. If you're interested, then you can give them a call and see. Does anybody have anything for me? I think next month we're, yes. Make sure everybody's signed in, please. And I think next month we're gonna do something on debt consolidations. Yeah, just remind me when I go, I don't remember. So I hope you enjoyed the lunch.
Wonderful, thank you.
Have a good rest of July. That's all I got. Unless you have more questions for Matt, you can hang out.
My daughter bought it.
I have a pink one. I killed 31, so I ordered a pink one when they were on sale one time.
Oh, yeah. She, what I do is I stick it in my big one.